Hello friends, let's see provision for registration under goods and service tax. Registration under GST subject to turnover. Every supplier making taxable supplies of goods or services or both will have to take registration if aggregate turnover in financial year exceeds 2 million. Such supplier required to make application within 30 days from the date he become liable to get registered, whereas a casual or a non-resident taxable person required to make application at least 5 days prior to commencement to business. Registration for supplier of special category state. In case supplier makes taxable supplies of goods or services or both from any of the special category state, he shall be liable to registration if aggregate turnover in financial year exceeds 1 million. Special category states listed here. As per subsection 6 of section 2 of the CGST Act, aggregate turnover inclusions are all taxable supplies, all exempt supplies, exports of goods and or service, all interstate supplies of a person having the same PAN, all supplies made by the taxable person, whether on his own account or made on behalf of all his principals. The above shall be computed on all India basis. Exclusions are taxes charged under the CGST Act, SGST Act, UGST Act and IGST Act, value of supplies on which tax is levied on reverse charge basis, and value of inward supplies. This is where limit of 20 million for registration does not apply, that is mandatory registration under GST. Any person making inter-state supplies, casual taxable persons making taxable supply, persons who are required to pay tax under reverse charge, non-resident taxable persons making taxable supply, person who deduct EDSU/S51 of CGST Act, person who make taxable supplies on behalf of other person, input service distributors, person supplying through electronic commerce operator, any person supplying data access, retrieval service from place outside India to a person in India. Other important points. State-wise registration is to be taken in case business in more than one state. A person having multiple business verticals in a state may obtain a separate registration for each business vertical. However, such registration is optional. A person may get himself registered voluntary. PAN number is mandatory to obtain registration under GST. Inter-state supplies. Person making inter-state supplies will have to take mandatory registration. Such person will have to take registration under GST even if he makes supplies of 1 rupee. In case person required to pay taxes under reverse charge, such person will have to take mandatory registration under GST. Mandatory registration for casual taxable person. Casual taxable person means a person who occasionally undertakes transactions of supply of goods and or services in the course or furtherance of business, whether as principal, agent or in any other capacity, in a taxable territory where he has no fixed place of business. Such person have to take compulsory registration. Time limit for registration. Such person have all apply for registration at least 5 days before commencement of business. Validity of registration. The certificate of registration issued to a casual taxable person shall be valid for a period specified in the application for registration or 90 days from the effective date of registration, whichever is earlier. Advance tax. Advance deposit of tax in an amount equivalent to the estimated tax liability of such person for the period for which the registration is sought. Mandatory registration for non-resident person. Non-resident person making taxable will have to take compulsory registration. No exemption has been given to such person. Time limit for registration. Such person have all apply for registration at least 5 days before commencement of business. Validity of registration. The certificate of registration issued to a non-resident taxable person shall be valid for a period specified in the application for registration or 90 days from the effective date of registration, whichever is earlier. Advance tax. Advance deposit of tax in an amount equivalent to the estimated tax liability of such person for the period for which the registration is sought. Person required to deduct TDS under Section 51 of CGST Act. The government may provide for the person where such person have to deduct TDS and deposit such TDS to the government. All such person will have to take mandatory registration. No exemption limit has been provided to these people. Agent who supplies on behalf of principal. Persons who make taxable supply of goods or services, or both on behalf of other taxable persons, whether as an agent or otherwise, will have to take mandatory registration under GST. Input service distributors. Input service distributors has been defined under subsection 61 of section 2 of the CGST Act. It is basically an office meant to receive tax invoices towards receipt of input services and further distribute the credit to supplier units having the same PAN proportionately. Separate registration. The input service distributor's registration is for one office of the taxpayer, which will be different from the normal registration. Taxpayer can have multiple registration. Electronic commerce operator or person supplying via electronic commerce operator. Electronic commerce operator means any person who owns, operates or manages digital or electronic facility or platform for electronic commerce will have to take mandatory registration irrespective of aggregate turnover. Person not liable for registration. Any person exclusively engaged in supplying goods or services, or both, that are not liable to tax or wholly exempted from GST or IXT is not required to take registration. An agriculturist, to the extent of supply or produce out of cultivation of land.